Hello everyone, I'm Samantha Jane Smith.
And I'm Jacob Keynes, and you are listening to the Classical Queer Podcast. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Classical Queer Podcast. This month we're very thrilled to be joined by two members of the Trash Panda Brass Band, which is a queer brass band based in Toronto, Toronto, for those of you who are Canadian. And we're very excited to chat with you both, but also to hear some of the music that you've been playing and hear about what the band does in Halifax and what you're kind of up to next. So I'll let you introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about maybe what you play in the band, your background, anything you want to tell us. But maybe Charlotte, you want to go first?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so my name's Charlotte. In the Trash Panda Brass, I play mellophone. However, when we went to U of T for French horn classical performance, I ended up playing mellophone because we decided to play on the street, busking. And unfortunately, French horn doesn't lend itself to that very well. It faces backwards, it's conical, all of those things. So we picked up some mellophones, and that's how that happened. As I said, I went to school for classical music, and now I play a lot of pop music and hip hop music. How that happened was actually a long time ago. I think in 2016, someone named Donnie Milwaukee posted on Facebook, "Yo, French horn players, what up?" And someone tagged me in the post. And so from there, I met him. I went out to the Beaches Jazz Festival to play in his hip hop band. And then that turned into Bangers Brass, which I played in for a long time. And that's how I sort of got familiar with the style. Yeah, I think that's where I'll start, and things might come up later.
Great. Wonderful. And yourself, tell us about your background.
So my name is Bien. I play trombone in Trash Panda Brass. However, I also do play sousaphone occasionally with the band when our sousaphone player can't make it to a gig. My education, I started on tenor trombone as one. Actually, no, I started on euphonium, and then in like the 8th grade, I switched to trombone, and then did that for a little bit, then switched to bass trombone, which then I went to U of T for classical bass trombone, where I played in like the U of T big bands and stuff. And then, so I have my undergrad in classical bass trombone, but now I just do a lot of like pop horns and like commercial work, commercial doubling work. So I'll play like sousaphone and like tuba and euphonium for like various like pit theater productions and stuff, as well as like just doing like backing horns for like pop artists and like rock artists and stuff. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. Were you at U of T at the same time?
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, I think 1 year of crossover. I think I was in 4th year and Bien was in 1st year.
Mm-hmm. We were in orchestra together for a year. So
yes.
Okay, so we've got your individual background. So how did Trash Panda Brass come about? And the name, of course, that's got to be explained. So give us a background on how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so it started out with my good friend Alinka, who is now everyone's good friend, and she was in the same year as me for classical French horn performance as well. We wanted it sort of had an evolution. So we wanted to do a French horn quartet. We had little jazz arrangements. We tried to get that off the ground, and it didn't really work a couple times. And so we worked at a place called Drum Taberna with Ray and Bien, also worked there. And we decided to all get together, and they played the 3rd and 4th horn parts on trombone. We then decided to add some pop tunes in. Once we did that, we're like, oh, this would sound way better with bass and drums. So we got a drummer and a sousaphone player. When Alinka was naming the band, she wanted it to be Toronto based without it being Toronto street band or something like that. And so in Toronto, we call raccoons Trash Pandas. And there are so many raccoons all over the city. So that's sort of our branding as well. But it ended up being Trash Panda Brass with a raccoon logo.
Yeah. It initially wasn't meant to be like a queer ensemble, but it just so happened that everyone that Alinka was asking to like be in this thing was queer, and I was like, why don't we like lean into that, you know, like make it our thing or whatever. But yeah, very happy that it is a queer
we've
ensemble.
all learned something about Toronto and Trash Pandas now, so that's educated the wider world now, I think. So.
This is the veil that gets lifted on Toronto. Is if you haven't spent a lot of time in Toronto, you think it's one city, and then you spend a lot of time there, and there's just a lot of like raccoons around sometimes.
There's tons. They're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the myth. I'm headed there in about a week, and I'm very much expecting to see a couple raccoons. That's just par for the course in Toronto. It's hot. It's hotter than people think, and there are a lot of raccoons.
Yeah.
So how did you come around to? I mean, you've got classical backgrounds, as you've said. How did you come to? I mean, we're going to hear some of your music recorded as Trash Panda. How did you come into the sort of more remake of pop music? Or was that just by accident? You just all liked it, kind of thing? You said, "Hey, this is great." I mean,
like a little bit, but like, cause like I remember, I was working in the kitchen when like we were both on a shift together when Alinka asked me to do this, and we were both like, man, it would be so fun if we just like played pop music just for like whatever. Like we weren't intending on it becoming like this whole thing that it has become, but like we were just like doing it for fun. Cause like we all did like, well, most of us, except for like the drummer and like the other trombone player, did degrees in classical music. So like pop and like anything with like a drum groove really wasn't like something we got to explore much of in the classical side of education. So we just thought it'd be like, why not? Be fun. Loosen up a little bit.
Also, because we wanted to go busking, we figured it would be good to have songs that are very recognizable. Because before we were playing arrangements of jazz standards, which are great, and some people recognize them, but they're not in the public consciousness in the way that pop music is. So we figured we would go for some popular music as well. And then that's understandably what got the best reactions, and it's very fun to play. And certainly easier than jazz standards to arrange for quartet plus bass and drums. And so that's where we ended up going. And because we're all queer in the band, we decided to do a lot of queer songs as well. Not exclusively, but we try to prioritize it. And yeah, that's how it started.
I can't believe it was an accident you turned out all to be queer. I just can't believe that. We've talked about this before, Jacob and I, that these things sort of like just seem to materialize. And when you all start talking to one another in a group, you find, hey, we're all very similar. It's kind of fascinating.
And I might even say, like, especially brass players, like especially classical brass, is such a like cis straight world, like deeply like brass world is particularly bad. I mean, and for those people who follow like classical music drama in the orchestral world, there's been so many cases, especially recently, like in the past like 3 months, of like horrible men in like brass world doing terrible things. And so to find a whole bunch of like queer brass players is even more niche. That's even better, you know? So how long have you been together? How many kind of iterations has it been?
We just, at the beginning of June, we just passed our 2-year anniversary. So we're into our 3rd year.
Gotcha. And has it been the same members kind of consistently, more or less, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
We've cycled through like... drummers.
You know what drummers are like, you know, they knock on the door and they're always late. So it's kind of...
I mean, we didn't say that, but...
No, I know, it's a standing joke. I've got a drummer friend and it's...
Yeah.
You know, they're always coming late. So.
But generally speaking, you've been more or less the same group.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And the arrangements that you do, who does most of the arranging? Is it kind of everybody takes one on? Is there one person who tends to do arranging?
Yen is a machine.
So I didn't do a lot of arranging, and actually I didn't do any arranging when I was in school, but like ever since this band got together, like we, like at first it was our other trombone player Ray that did all the arranging because he had like the jazz background, and so he took classes in arranging and stuff, and so like he would teach us things, and like in the very first year that we like did this, it sort of just became like something that like I couldn't really stop doing just because I was like, whoa, this is so like sick. So I guess I've arranged like a good chunk of the book accidentally.
Great.
You know,
You're addicted, Bien. You're addicted.
I mean, like a little, but like whatever.
Well, they're very good arrangements. I will
Thank
say
you.
they're great. And I think it's funny you said, Charlotte, like the appeal of doing pop music as a busking thing is I mean, obviously, of course, but like they're just such great songs to play as well. Like I was sitting there listening to them as a musician, thinking like I just want to sub in, I want to sit and play. Like it sounds like so much fun to like just jam on. They're great songs. They're great choices.
Yeah, they're really fun. And it's cool listening to pop music more closely in order to arrange them, and how drastically different certain artists are from other artists. For example, I tried for a very long time to write an ABBA medley, but there's so much going on in ABBA music that it took me. So we played as a guest artist with a group called the Hannaford Youth Band, which is a English style silver band. And for that, I wrote the ABBA medley because there's 18 voices as opposed to 4. So I could fit everything in. And then from there, I reduced it. But now it's extremely hard. And so we don't really play it. And hopefully we can edit it.
Yeah, we're in the process of like editing it down and like making it actually like reasonable to play, because I and Charlotte can very much attest to this. I love to write really almost impossibly high mellophone parts. Just because it's like, oh yeah, I mean like it's basically writing for a trombone quartet, except like our lead player has crazy chops, so like I'll make them play a high E, that's no problem.
He does the
like
thing. He does the thing where like he'll send me a screenshot of something he's arranging and be like, can I write this? I'm like, absolutely not. And so he goes to Alinka. It's like, hey, can I write this? And she's like, sure. So we end up with all this stuff in her parts.
She does it though. It's crazy. Like we just did an arrangement of Chapel Roan's Hot to Go. And in the original like record, they go in octaves. And I was like, I would like those octaves. Alinka, baby girl, can I please write the octaves? And then she said yes. And it ended up being like the highest I've ever written for French horn. And she just like, we played it as our encore, at the end of like a 2-hour set at, Drome Taberna. And she was like, still like pumping that stuff out. I was like, how are you doing this?
Yeah, she's a bit of a beast.
Yeah.
So maybe just explain for non-brass players, because I'm sure we have a lot listening.
Yes.
Okay. There's some difficulty here. Well, explain the difficulty to somebody who's not a brass player about the octaves.
The octaves, well, it's just like you get to, it's like singing really, really, really high. Like if you have a certain voice type, I guess. Also, take this with a grain of salt. I am not a singer. I love Sabrina Carpenter. I am not a singer. It's like you're writing at the very top of their range. And yes, sometimes you can theoretically do it. However, sometimes it won't sound very easy, or it'll just sound like bad.
Is this to do with the
running very high.
Your mouth format? I mean, what is it that makes it difficult?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's sort of like, so, you know, when you go to sing really high and there's like it feels like your throat is like clenching in on itself. It's basically that, but like on your lips. And so some people can do that for a short amount of time, but it's extremely uncomfortable, and it's a skill that you have to hone a lot. And then the range that Hot to Go goes into for the first mellow part is kind of like Mariah Carey style, where you're like, how is this even happening? Like, it's not like someone singing regular high. It's like, what the heck is going on kind of high?
It's like Dua Lipa trying to sing like Mariah Carey or Ariana Grande.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a mezzo trying to sing Queen of the Night. Again, I'm not a singer, so take that with a grain of salt.
I think it's an accurate way of describing it. I think for me, I'm not a brass player. I'm a woodwindist, so I would say like your chops just get tired. Like it's a literal muscle that after a while, if your muscle isn't really strong, it's just tiring, and you like stop being able to do it. For a lot of people, and so the arrangements, they're like impressive arrangements because some of them are very high. I was also listening to those, like, wow, that's very high.
Let's take a listen to one, shall we? Seeing we talked about them, what should we listen to first?
I think we listened to Nazax. That's been my favorite leading up to this.
Let's take a listen to that then. This is Montero.
So you've been playing as kind of like a largely outdoor gig band in a lot of ways, but I'm sure you played tons of things. Where have you been playing? What kind of gigs have you been doing? What kind of gigs do you want to be doing? All of that.
We've been doing a fairly wide range of gigs this year. Last year, it was the majority of what we did was busking. This year, we've only busked, I think, twice or three times. It's really not been very much. We've done some weddings, of course, as with every band in existence. We've done some festivals. We applied for Pride, but we didn't get a stage spot, unfortunately. So sad. We do community events. I think those are sort of the main three pillars of what we do. And it's very nice. We're at a place financially in the band where we can do discounts for queer events or for community events. And that feels real nice to be able to do. yeah, especially now that we have more gigs coming in than we have the past summers, we're able to do that a little bit more readily, and that's quite nice.
And I was wondering, I mean, so you bring that up. I was wondering how much of your, I hate to use the word ethos, but like ethos of the ensemble is like also for the queer community. It could maybe happenstance that the band ended up being kind of a queer band, but by nature of it, I'm assuming you want to play queer events, and I'm assuming you also, I mean, maybe not queer events sometimes too, but you know, if you can give discounts, if you can make it for the queer community, is that something you think about as a band? Is that something you really prioritize?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If it's like a private party or something where it's like just some guy like hiring us because they just want musicians at a party for their like home barbecue and stuff. Unless
triple
it's
really, the rate, right?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, quadruple
straight
because
rates. Straight rates.
Well, it's 3 times because we're us and we bring it every time, and the 4th time is reparations. Actually, please and thank you. So okay. Anyway, so for those kinds of events, for people that just want like entertainment, whatever. Typically we won't kind of budge our rates, but if it's something like, hey, we're like a queer artists market and what are your rates? And then we send them our rates, and then they reply back and say, oh, we only have X amount allotted. Then we'll kind of whoever's doing it go back into the chat and be like, hey, this market is looking to see if they can have us for this amount of money. Is this something we're interested in? And then we'll all go and do like a bit of research. If it's something that's serving the queer community, or if it's like run by people of color, we're very much more inclined to bargain. Whereas if it's just like a major corporation being like, hi, gay, do you want to play for our event, Brass Gay?
Yeah.
We'll give you $2. We'll be like,
thanks.
Yeah.
Which is actually...
Sorry, go on, Charlotte.
Oh, I was going to say on the last note, on a slightly more serious note, something that we've run into a few times this year that's been pretty disappointing is during June, you know, Pride Month, everyone wants to, I'm doing air quotes, like uplift the queer community, but then they really kind of refuse to pay us our rates. And that's, it's been kind of sad. Like there's this assumption that like we're kind of down to do anything during Pride Month because we're queer, but that's not really how that works. And so that's been slightly disheartening this year as we're sort of experiencing that for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's kind of quite a common position to be in. I think, they it's always like we're doing you a favor by having you come and play at our company or something. You know, we're going to put a rainbow flag up and everything will be fine, and then you'll be happy, sort of thing. And it's kind of cynical, really. But there we go. I was going to ask you though. I mean, okay, so how do you find the audience response to your music? I mean, I'd love to see this actually sort of in the streets or in a Pride event and this. So give us some feel about how the interaction goes.
I'd say it's overwhelmingly positive. Surprisingly so. I thought that more people would be angry with us when we perform on the street. There are some people who have, big feelings about it. But for the most part, sometimes we gather a crowd. There's certain songs that we know will almost always do that. It's quite positive. And when we play at Drum Taberna, when we have our inside shows, they get so excited and drunk and dance and stuff, and it's great. And there are some people who we see it like almost every time we play there, which is so nice. It's quite positive and excited.
It's also like very touching just because we will have like queer people and like also like a lot of women come up to us and be like, I've never seen like an ensemble like this that was mainly women or queer people and stuff. And so like, it's always very, very touching when a fellow minority comes up to us and is like, thank you. And it makes the world so much like better for me personally, just because like especially going to school for classical bass trombone and low brass land, that was so dominated by like maleness and like cis heteronormativity that I was like, oh my god, I feel extremely like alienated. And a lot of the experiences that these people were talking about, I'm like, I can't really relate to so much. So just being able to create a space where those things aren't as big of barriers, where everyone is very like welcome and open and everyone's just trying to have fun.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've talked about, I know with other people, is sort of queering. I think Jacob always used this queering the space. You know, just by existing, you sort of queer the space. But if you can go out and perform as well, that kind of, you know, just changes the whole feeling of the environment around you, which is why things like Pride events and events with queer groups playing is so wonderful, because you can kind of associate with people in that event. So that's really great. Shall we listen to another piece? So I think we need to listen to, let's go with Katy Perry, I Kissed a Girl. How about that? We'll listen to that.
The interesting thing for me as a classical musician, largely classical musician, no one's truly a exclusively classical musician anymore, but as somebody who teaches in a university for classical music, it's interesting for me that you can become this point of entry back into like brass world and back into classical music. And my thought is always that we can make classical music, but like maybe through a pop lens, whatever, but like small C classical music, super queer. It is very possible. And I'm always interested in finding different ways, more people, more avenues, different ways to bring people back into music, and kind of, not to get too heavy about it, but like heal that trauma of being like a classical musician that so many of us have gone through, that we went through this world where it was really, your queer self was not part of the equation at all, but it can be. And it really, in a lot of ways, should be for a lot of musicians. And I've found a lot of musicians, and I think I'm talking to two of them right now, who, like, after going through classical music world, have found a value in their queerness in bringing it to classical music. But maybe that's like too morose a way of thinking about it. But like, do you think it's something that like has brought you closer to like your music making self by kind of like being a queer musician?
Absolutely. Like,
Yeah, me too.
I I very much, obviously I'm very grateful for the classical training that I did receive in college, but I also was very traumatized by it in a lot of ways as well. And doing Trash Panda specifically, where you know, it's a space where really like all of us really haven't done much like pop music before, and kind of this space where learning together is encouraged and like making mistakes is encouraged, and I'm using air quotes, sounding bad is encouraged, and like all embraced as part of the process towards like becoming better at this idiom or like this branch of music. And on top of that, having people that are just like you and can relate to lots of different experiences that you as like a minority can relate to. Like, we often call ourselves a feelings band. We will like talk about different things that made us like uncomfortable at like gigs, and like we kind of bond over like shared experiences of like homophobia and like misogyny. Obviously, like as a cis male, like I don't experience the kind of misogyny that like the women in our band do, but being able to bond over how misogyny affects me as like a gay man, and the kind of power dynamic that creates within the music sphere has been very, very, very.
It's also been transformative for me as well to sort of center my queerness a little bit more in the music I make. Like Bien said, we're like a feelings band, and something that's not really encouraged very much in classical music land is like talking about negative experiences. And that's how, as Jacob, you alluded to earlier, how you end up with so many terrible men in positions of power in classical brass. And now there's so many stories coming out about it. And one of the things that's so nice about our band is that if anything happens that makes us uncomfortable, right away it gets talked about. And that's such a beautiful thing, and makes a very, I hate to say safe space because that's so overused, but genuinely like a safe space where we can talk about stuff that needs to be talked about. Also, something that I've taken from the queer community is like true community, and really helping each other and lifting each other up, and having wild differences between people, but really working together a lot. And in classical music, especially as a French horn player where you have a 4-person section, there can be a lot of competition within the section. And I've found the times that I've gone back to a classical like orchestra section, I've brought along the sense of community that I've embedded into my playing now with this band, that really helps my musicianship, that there's not that sense of competition. There's not the like striving for the main, like being the main character that was a little bit back there before, like a little bit back in my mind. And that's awesome. It really opens the door to being much more receptive to what's going on in the section. If I'm playing first, sort of taking into account more what everyone else is doing, as opposed to just having the typically accepted classical idea of like the first horn player dictates everything that happens in the section. And that's lovely. It makes it so much more enjoyable to play. I've always loved playing classical music, especially orchestral music, but it just makes it that much better. I like that a lot.
And it's just like being able to ask for help and like not being judged for it is like, it's wonderful. Like truly, like I obviously being classically trained, like I didn't really learn how to like improvise on my instrument ever until I got to Trash Panda, and like through Trash Panda that's where I really was able to like learn how to do the whole improvising thing, because not only did I have like people like Ray, the other trombone player, to like help teach me how to do all of that stuff, I was also in that space where sounding bad or like immature, again air quotes, was not just like accepted but like encouraged, almost like we're all just trying and everyone wants to see each other like at least attempt, and like it's just, yeah, it's very nice not having to be perfect at the first time you know, of everything.
I think you've kind of hit a big sort of thing that I think doesn't just apply to music, but it applies to lots of things that we grow up in a society where, all this competition and things and is so inbred in people that when you do meet the queer community, which I've always found to be very supportive of everything, it's suddenly like, well, where have I been? Or where's this come from? And it's such a different feeling. And I think when you see it in music, I know we kind of talked about this in other cases, is that it brings a different feel to the music. Because it's got some other, I don't know what to call it, timbre to it and feeling to it that isn't there in maybe a more straight context.
Like camaraderie almost.
Also, another thing that I really like about the way that like queerness and supportiveness, I guess, as you're saying, comes out in our music is that by contrast to sort of street band music, like brass band and the way that we play it, there's a lot of focus on being badass in a lot of the community, of being like really cool and grungy. And I find that we, even though like sometimes we kind of go there like we do with Montero, and we have a couple other arrangements, Seven Rings and Where Have You Been and whatnot, that sort of have the big bass drops and all that. But most of our music is just really upbeat and joyful and like approaching bubblegum sometimes. And it's just really nice. It's, we don't have that sort of like needing to like dominate that kind of tone in our music. It doesn't happen very often. And that's quite nice as well.
Yeah. It almost makes it a little bit jarring to play with other brass bands sometimes because you do get that like dynamic where obviously it's fun to be the center, like the star of the show or whatever, but like especially like playing in like other brass bands in the city, it's hard like having to do that like all the time always. And like when I first started like branching out after getting my name out there in Trash Panda, playing with other brass bands, like it was like such a culture shock moment, because like I feel like very much Trash Panda, the music and the vibe we bring to our shows is let's have fun together, let's just let's be a little bit stupid and let's just like sing some Katy Perry, it's not that serious. Whereas with like other brass bands and stuff, it's like, okay, now you have to shred. And I'm like, okay, because like I can barely navigate a 2/5, but I will try.
And it's really, I feel like we're talking about it in a negative way. It's really cool, and it's the way that the brass band scene is, and that's like the type of music that's there. Embedded into that, though, is sort of this like straight masculinity that's like main character, and it's so cool having a band that doesn't focus on that, and then that kind of naturally comes out in our music, playing differently, and we're still within the genre. Like, we played, appropriate things, but just the nature of the people in the band and the way that we communicate and our priorities and whatnot, and it comes out to have just a different feeling in our music as well. And that's, it's cool. But yeah, we've carved out a bit of a space for ourselves amongst the brass band community in Toronto, and that's been lovely. And like Bien said, sort of going, so like I mentioned, the band that I used to play in a lot, and now the band sort of half disbanded. So occasionally we'll like resurrect it, but for the most part it doesn't play anymore. But Bangers Brass, it's just such a different vibe when we're hanging backstage and we're chatting and whatnot. It's hard to put a finger on how, like, what exactly makes it different, but it feels like all of a sudden I'm in this like very straight, very hyper masculine space that I am fortunate to have a repose from in the main band that I play in.
Do you think you play differently?
Totally.
It actually affects your playing, yeah?
Yeah, totally. I'm way more inclined to sort of, I don't know how to just like really paste it all the time in that band, and the like just kind of play as loud as I can, because that's the volume of the band, even volume alone. Whereas I think one of the things that sets our band apart is that we have quite an extended lower side of the dynamic range. And that's pretty neat. And then when we play loud, because we don't have trumpets or saxophones, it's still quite manageable to listen to because we have much mellower instruments at which kind of suits her personality, so she never planned.
Yeah, like going back to like, because I also play with bangers when they like occasionally resurrect, thanks to Charlotte. I find the way that I improvise and the way that I like kind of approach the blowing in either context, like in bangers, I find I have to be like, okay, you're like you're gonna play the heck out of the trombone and you're gonna play so fast and you will shred. Whereas with Trash Panda, yes, I can do that, but I can also be a little bit dumb and a little bit stupid. There was a while when I first started blowing, we would play What Makes You Beautiful, by, I don't know if you know them. They're kind of like small and indie, like One Direction, way back when. We play it, and there was a point where I realized, wait a minute, I can quote Till Eulenspiegel in this, and it will make Charlotte and Alenka cringe like crazy, but it works over the changes. So I'm gonna do it because it's funny and whatever. But yeah, just like having the freedom to like be able to do that and like not worry about, oh my God, are they gonna call me back? Or did I just make a fool of myself? Has been very liberating, and also has been such like a huge part in like my improvisation journey, because yeah, just developing a sense of humor about the whole music thing is like so freeing.
Yeah, and on the note of like being able to be goofy, one time in the show, Bien quoted and everyone just kind of laughed. Yeah, it was very silly and goofy.
That sounds fantastic. Well, shall we take another listen to one of these tracks off your EP? What should we listen to this time?
I think we do I Don't Feel Like Dancing.
I Don't Feel Like Dancing. Yeah, okay, we'll take a listen.
I have to say, I Don't Feel Like Dancing is, I truly, not knowing the age of the two of you, brings me back to sitting in my car in probably grade 10, and driving around with my friends and putting that at like an ungodly volume, like ear splitting volume. And I hadn't heard it since probably high school. And then I saw it on there and I was instantly transported back to such a specific time in my life, listening to that. And also that Jake Shears has taken off into such weird directions. He was in the West End doing a show, and he also has a podcast about classical or queer music, not classical. But anyway, great selection.
Thank you. I love that.
Sorry, carry on, Charlotte.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's so nice, like, hearing people talk about that kind of thing. Like, you're definitely not the first person to come to us being like, oh my god, it brings me back, because we have, like I said, like ABBA and some other things that are like from a little while ago. It's very fun.
But thank you, Jacob. Grade 10 when your Scissor Sisters. Come on.
I know.
Give me a break. If we're back to ABBA, that might be more like my
Yeah, we're spanning generations.
We're spanning the generations here. Thank you very much. Yes.
Just like the band.
Just like the band, yeah. Hey, have you got some old people in it then? That's the next thing. Need some old people.
Old to bien.
Old?
No, it's not.
You're in deep trouble.
No. That was a joke. For legal purposes, that was a joke. Please don't cancel me on Twitter. That would be really nice.
I'm hitting the mute now, Vienna. That's it.
I mean, like, there's a little bit of an age difference. Not huge, per se, but like, I'm 24 and I am the youngest in the band, and well, that's a 6-year age. Now that I'm saying it out loud, it's a 6-year age. It's like, but it's also like enough children. Of like a difference.
You're all children. Go away.
I'm literally so tiny and small. Like anyway. Oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, but we have enough of like a range of ages that we do span, I guess, 2 generations or whatever. Like, we very much have our millennials and then our like older Gen Z in this band. And so I guess that's where we get like a wider range of like music. Like, Alinka was the one actually that arranged I Don't Feel Like Dancing, and so we have hits from like back then, and I'm trying to bring more new repertoire. Like, I'm in the process of arranging Please, Please, Please by Sabrina Carpenter, as well as Espresso. And then again, like Chapel Roan. Like, this is a Chapel Roan stan club.
But it is interesting that everybody we talk to, and I mean, I only bring this up because I live in Sweden, so ABBA is quite appropriate. But it is kind of like, everybody sort of loves ABBA from even if it's so long ago, and it's always struck me as kind of amazing, really, that their music is still loved today by everybody, and it's kind of, we'll have an ABBA evening.
I will say, Charlotte, you're quite correct though, that like maybe their lasting power is that their music is actually weirdly complex in a lot of ways. Because I have similarly done arrangements of ABBA things, and I run the Halifax Queer Ensemble, which is like a more wind ensemble version of like a queer ensemble. And we also had to edit our ABBA arrangement because it was strangely complex once we started getting everything that we really wanted to put in there. And this ensemble they're mostly amateurs and beginners. They're largely not pros in any way, shape, or form. And they love playing ABBA, but it's hard to play. Like, it's a lot more difficult to do, but it's always a crowd pleaser, universally.
Totally. There's in my first and second year at U of T, my theory TA was doing his doctorate in theory. And one of the things that he talked about was comparing ABBA harmony to Wagner and how there's a lot of crossover there. And I thought that was absolutely wild. Unfortunately, I haven't read any of his things, so I can't go into detail about it, but that's one of the main things that he talked about all the time, and he'd get us to listen to some of the simpler ABBA stuff for ear training. That was great. It was very cool.
And I think this is kind of one of the things that a lot of people, I mean, you know, we all love classical music, but you know, there tends to be a thing among some classical people that, you know, pop music is just pop music. It's just kind of like,
my God,
you know, this kind of like, hey, it's not as good, it's not as this, it's not as that. It's certainly different, but some of it is really complicated and extremely clever. And I think this is something that I kind of like about what you're doing, is you're kind of doing this kind of crossover-y sort of thing, which takes both, if you like. I mean, it's, although you're playing pop tracks, you're taking classical experiences into it. And I think this is kind of what we need, because I think we've said this before, classical music can be much too staid, yet here we see, you know, the kind of music which gets people excited. So it's kind of fun to see you doing this, I think.
Yeah, like classical music, pop music is so like complex in itself as well. And I find like I didn't really start to fully like enjoy and like appreciate it until I did start like arranging for the band, because there's so many like different things that different artists use to like build energy and drop energy and stuff. And even like, and if people love to say, oh, pop music is so like lame because it's literally just like the 1/6 whatever, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, it's a great 1/6 first of all, and also there's like other things like that you should be listening for, that, you know, like you can't be listening to pop music the same way that you would listen to like a Beethoven symphony. Like, if you're doing it like that, obviously you're not going to enjoy pop music. And I also feel like it's a very ignorant thing to be doing, because like you're placing all of like the value of music into one thing when there's so many different things to like consider.
Yeah.
But sorry, go on, Charles.
I know you guys talk about this in many of your episodes, where in classical land, there's sort of this idea that classical music is the best music and other music is fine. And it's frustrating to me because, there are some classical pieces that are absolute bangers. They're so good. And then there are other ones that aren't. For example, one that I like coming back to is the Beethoven Horn Serenade, that is only famous because it's Beethoven. The lore is that he wrote it in one day. And it's just, you know, fine. There's lots of music today that's only popular because the people who wrote it are popular. Fine. But there's this idea that it's the harmony and it's the texture of the live instruments that make it a superior. But what about like the inflection? You know, it takes a long time, I feel, to be able to play pop music well, because there's so much like playing with where the melody fits over the beat, if it's forward, if it's back, different like grace notes that happen, little turns and whatnot, decorations that vocalists will put on it that you have to emulate as an instrumentalist, that are really difficult to pick up. And if we're, you know, I don't actually think this, but if we're like deciding criteria that makes music good or makes musicians good. It's like in classical music, everything you need to play is written on the page. And the thing that makes you a great classical musician is playing exactly what's on the page and like exactly what's prescribed in a certain style, right? Like true classical, like, 1700 to 1750 or whatever. It's like, there's so many rules. And if you do those rules exactly as they're supposed to, then you're a fantastic musician. And that to me is like, that's kind of boring. And if you're going to decide that certain things are more important than other things, then I guess pop music's the best music. But like, there is no best music. It's what you like or don't like. And I think the fact that many people love and relate to pop music is a testament to it being good music.
I also will say the argument against pop music being lesser than classical music is if it's so fucking easy, then all these classical musicians who try and play pop music should sound phenomenal right out of the gate, and they don't. So there is, if it was that easy, then you should all be able to step on stage and immediately be able to play like a killer pop band. And it sounds like Trash, and not Trash Panda, but like Trash. And so that's the argument against it.
Yeah, and also another thing is that, like, in most other styles of music, you need to memorize music. Either learn it by ear or read it and then memorize it. And that's just a skill that a lot of classical musicians don't have. And there's exceptions to this, right? Like opera singers, most singers in general need to memorize a ton of music. People who play concertos need to memorize music most of the time. But if you're a chamber ensemble player or you're an orchestral player or something, that's just not a skill that you need to develop. And so that's another barrier of being a classical musician coming into pop music, is that you need to memorize music, sometimes hours of it. And it's just, it's not really accessible sometimes.
And like, I feel like there's also like a lot of emphasis in classical and in like virtuosity being above everything else. And I feel like, yes, it's sick that you can like shred. I'm using shred a lot today. I swear I don't say shred as often as I have been today. I know, that's crazy. Anyway, oh god, I lost my train of thought. But like, just the emphasis on technique, like, yes, the way a pop trombone player plays in like a backing band, the same notes written on a page played by a classical musician. If you were to play like that in front of like an audition committee, that would get you like, it's like, thank you, we've heard enough, after you like even just breathe for your first note. But like, there's so much like glossed over, like, there's not enough value on like actual like musicianship and just like, and I just feel like there's so much that's overlooked by people that rag on pop music. Inflections, phrasing, time feel. I get very passionate and heated.
Yes, one of the things that I know we've sort of mentioned, which goes back to something we said about 3 or 4 minutes ago, was like, when you talk to some classical people and the people who, I must say, I'd say the pompous end of the classical music people, it's not only, that they've got this ranking in their mind of levels of music complexity. And it astonishes me. For example, I was having a discussion with somebody once about opera. I like opera. I think it's really exciting. I think it'd be fantastic. And they were saying how their favorite operas were Wagner. I'm not a big Wagnerian kind of girl, if you know what I mean. They kind of like it. Mm-hmm. I just love the frivolity of Rossini's operas. And I said to them, hey, fine, fantastic. I really love Rossini. Oh, they're not proper operas. They're not like, they're not like the proper opera. They're just, he used to dash them off in a day, and they're just like a frivolous kind of trivial, amusing thing and this kind of thing. And it goes, yeah, they are amusing. So what's the point, And so this hierarchy of music that these people put, and it goes down between this, and then there's jazz, and then there's, and this, and your argument about what classical musicians do. Hey, they should all be able to play jazz if they're that good. But jazz is kind of like a completely different, world. So, yeah.
And so it's also this like weird like devaluing of like the other genres that I'm finding as well. Like in my classical training, we would do like chamber group master classes and stuff, and like jazz as an entire genre would, and like an entirely different way of playing, would just be boiled down to like a piece of like oh, we should do a jazz piece, and that's us doing jazz, and we're on the same level as like jazz musicians. And it's just like, no, you're not. Also, first of all, you're playing pop. It's not jazz. Not everything with drums is jazz. Shocker. And it's just like, yeah.
Yeah. Let's hear another piece of music to clear our minds out. What are we going for this time?
Let's do Baby One More Time.
Baby One More Time, yeah. Britney Spears. Let's go for that.
And maybe Britney is a good kind of all-encompassing wrap-up to our conversation, as she maybe is in a number of ways. But I mean, it has been like truly a joy listening to your music, but also chatting with you both today. And I think there's something really, and this is what I always feel about like queer-centered music. There's something really genuinely exciting and really fruitful about centering queerness in music, whatever genre it is. There's so much more life to be had in playing that we don't give credit to. We have this constant conversation about like music is a dying art, or like classical music is going away, or orchestral instruments shouldn't be taught anymore, or whatever that conversation du jour is. But this is the complete antithesis to that like it's such a bunk attitude to have, that like there's so much liveliness in what you're doing, and there's so much like skill and energy and excitement in playing. And so whether it's Britney Spears or Nas X or whomever, like it doesn't matter. It's just so nice to like hear that you're doing these things. So thank you very much for playing. And maybe tell everybody where they can find you next. If you're in Toronto, where are you playing in the next? So this comes out at the beginning of August, the first Sunday in August. So thinking of that timeline, where will you be in August in Toronto, that people can hear you?
I am a slave to my GCal, so let me just look this up real quick. So it's coming out on August 4th.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, that was a question. My bad.
If that's the first Sunday, yes.
Yes.
The first Sunday, yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we are playing at the Midway stage, which is at the Canadian National Exhibition. We have a farmer's market in Weston Village on the 24th. We're playing in Scarborough, possibly on September 3rd. And then we have some other things out of town. But if people are interested, they can go on our Instagram. Everything is always posted there. And our
EP, the EP, give a link to your EP, is on
Spotify.
On Spotify?
Yes, on Spotify. If you'd like a physical copy, you can always email us and we'll gladly send one out. Yeah, and our Instagram handle is...
The EP is called Opposable Thumbs, and we put a lot of hard work into it and a lot of money into it, so please give us your money and buy us buy a copy.
Also, fun fact, we named it Opposable Thumbs because, as most people know, like raccoons have hands, but we found out that they actually don't have opposable thumbs. They just look like they are. And so that was a little bit sad. But anyway, our Instagram handle is...
I think we're just queering the meaning of opposable thumbs.
Yes, thank you.
Oh my God.
Instagram, Carlos. Instagram, quickly.
The Instagram handle is at Trash Panda Brass Band. And our email is trashpandabrass@gmail.com.
That's brilliant. Thank you both so much for coming along. We'll leave you with some more music, and hopefully we'll hear from you again sometime soon.
Thank you so much for having us.
So that's all for this episode. You've been listening to the Classical Queer Podcast, and Jake and I look forward to being with you next month. The incidental music is courtesy of Jared Miller, and the show was produced by Samantha Jane.